I'm your host, Briahna Joy I'm your host, Briahna
All right. What's going on, everybody? I know I am going live at an unusually earlier time. There's a lot of things going on at 7 o'clock tonight, so I figured I'd start a little bit early. But shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, and Twitter. What is going on? I want to say hello to some people in the chat. Shout out to Super Patriot with a thumbs up. All right. I don't know what's going on with my lighting. I think it's because of the time of day. Oh, well. Shout out to I Am McColvin says, whatever happened to Justin Jackson? Did he stray away from YouTube or does he have a new channel? Well, he plays football, so he's probably busy during the football season. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure when he's going to come back. Shout out to Christopher says AOC got into politics as a result. Her belief that the world was broken because person as pretty and important as she thinks she is shouldn't have to start adult life as working class bartender. I'm going to tell you something about that tonight. That's not exactly her, not quite her start. Shout out to Noli D says, OMG, 6 more minutes. That's so long. Noli's also a Sabby member. Shout out to Eric T. Red, who's a Sabby member that says, happy early Wednesday, lefty friends. Shout out to Hannah G, who says Sabby with a smile. Shout out to LPA Film says doobie doobie doo. Greetings, Lawrence Johnson, who's a Sabby member, also says doobie doobie doo. Shout out to Henry says, welcome back, Miss Sabrina. Oh, thank you. I've never been called Miss Sabrina before. It makes me feel some kind of way. Shout out to Delthea Simmons, who's a Sabby member, says, hello, everybody. Greetings, workers, farmers, government, and nationalization. Says, Sabby gonna spill the tea. I am. Shout out to Saul, says, yo. Shout out to Spherical Earther. There's musical notes there. I love the music. Shout out to Andrew, says, hey, Sabby, what up? Hello from Mexico. Well, hello. It's interesting. I have people from all over the world. Shout out to Steven, says, hey, comrades. Shout out to Danielle, says, my first live. Greetings, Brett James says, hi, everyone. Shout out to, I think I said Steven already. If I didn't, shout out to Steven, Sabby Doobie Doo. And shout out to both parties are traitors. Please, thumbs up. Shout out to you. What's going on? E. Heller says, oh, good. I got here just in time. Shout out to Colin says, happy Wednesday, Sabby. Happy Wednesday to you too as well, Colin. And shout out to Justin says, Guten Abend. Good evening, Sabs and RBM fam. And shout out to Cecilia says, hey, love. All righty. What's going on, Randy? He says, hi, Sabby. Love your show. Thank you so much. He or she, I shouldn't assume. Sorry. Yeah, let's go ahead and get into it, you guys. Let's get into it. I need to actually check my mic first. I didn't even check that. Let me hit a cancel real quick. Let me make sure I'm using the right microphone. Yes, I am. Okay. Quick shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. I'm going to put them up on the screen here. Thank you so much, guys, for your support. I really appreciate it. If you want to become a Sabby patron, I have 4 categories: members, Sabby, Sabsters, and the ultimate. Thank you so much. And all of their names are listed across the bottom of the screen. And shout out to Deb, who just became a new Sabby patron as well. I got to add her to this list. It has been a busy day. So what are we talking about tonight, ladies and gentlemen? Let's go ahead and go there, shall we? Tonight, we are talking about Briahna Joy Gray attacked. Yikes, on Twitter. It has been an interesting night. And actually today as well, people have been attacking Bri over a video that she made recently. We're going to talk about that. AOC backs Nancy Pelosi. What is that all about? I hate to say I told you so, but you know. And we're going to talk about Biden pushes war. I'm going to play those comments for you from Joe Biden about the situation that's going on in Ukraine and the U.S. involvement. So let's go ahead and get started with Joe Biden, man. We got to go there. We got to go there. I hate to say that I was right about this, but I was right about this. So Joe Biden recently gave a press conference. Oh God, that's his voice. Gave a press conference and he's talking about the escalating situation in Ukraine and Russia. For those who do not know, Russia has pulled back troops from the Ukraine border, but Joe Biden is not buying it. Let me go ahead and share this video for you because I want you to pay close attention to what he says about this situation. I don't trust Joe Biden. I don't believe him for one bit that we're not going to get involved. And I think you should be concerned as well. So let me go ahead and get that started.
Sacrifice basic principles, though. Nations have a right to sovereignty and territorial integrity. They have the freedom to set their own course and choose with whom they will associate. But that still leaves plenty of room for diplomacy and for de-escalation. That's the best way forward for all parties, in our view. We'll continue our diplomatic efforts in close consultation with our allies and our partners. As long as there is hope of diplomatic resolution that prevents the use of force and avoids incredible human suffering that would follow, we will pursue it. The Russian defense minister reported today that some military units are leaving their positions near Ukraine. That would be good, but we have not yet verified that. We have not yet verified the Russian military units are returning to their home bases. Indeed, our analysts indicate that they remain very much in a threatening position. And the fact remains, right now, Russia has more than 150,000 troops encircling Ukraine and Belarus and along Ukraine's border. An invasion remains distinctly possible.
I just want to jump in here for a second because I caught something there. So he had just said, he just told you that they can't confirm that troops have pulled away from the Ukraine border, that Russian troops have pulled away. He said that they actually have not been able to confirm that. But just right after that, he told you how many troops are present at the border. So he can confirm that. So if you can confirm the numbers that are there, all you have to do is a little bit of math to figure out the numbers that have vacated. Do you guys catch that? You can confirm who is presently there, but you can't confirm how many have left or if they've left or not. But you just gave us the numbers. Oh boy. Oh boy. You got to catch this stuff. You got to catch it.
Possible. That's why I've asked Ukraine's border. An invasion remains distinctly possible. That's why I've asked several times that all Americans in Ukraine leave now before it's too late to leave safely. It is why we have temporarily relocated our embassy from Kyiv to Lviv in Western Ukraine, approaching the Polish border. And we've been transparent with the American people and with the world about Russia's plans and the seriousness of the situation so that everyone can see for themselves what is happening. We've shared what we know and what we're doing about it. Let me be equally clear about what we are not doing. The United States and NATO are not a threat to Russia. Ukraine is not threatening Russia. Neither the U.S. nor NATO have missiles in Ukraine. We do not have plans to put them there as well.
I've heard that story before. The United States is not a threat. The United States is always a threat. We're always a threat. Let me make that very clear. It is the United States government that tries to police the world. We do that. Our government does that. We are always a threat. You know, it's interesting to me because, like, mainstream media, especially, of course, the presidential administration, they always try to make it seem like the United States are the good guys. We're the ones that's doing the right thing. And it's the other countries that are the problem. You ever notice that? Every conflict that we're involved in, we're the good guys. We're doing the right thing. So don't believe this for 1 second. Don't believe it. Don't believe it.
We're not targeting the people of Russia. We do not seek to destabilize Russia. To the citizens of Russia, you are not our enemy. And I do not believe you want a bloody, destructive war against Ukraine, a country and a people with whom you share such deep ties of family, history, and culture.
There he goes lying again. He says to the people of Russia, you're not our enemy. I have continued to see mainstream media tell us that Russia is our enemy. They have spilled this propaganda over and over for the past couple of months. It is absolutely insane. So now Joe Biden is trying to tell you that Russia is not our enemy. BS. BS. You have told us that they are.
77 years ago, our people fought and sacrificed side by side to end the worst war in history. World War II was a war of necessity. But if Russia attacks Ukraine, it would be a war of choice or a war without cause or reason. I say these things not to provoke, but to speak the truth, because the truth matters. Accountability matters. If Russia does invade in the days and weeks ahead, the human cost for Ukraine will be immense. And the strategic cost for Russia will also be immense. If Russia attacks Ukraine, it'll be met with overwhelming international condemnation. The world will not forget that Russia chose needless death and destruction. Invading Ukraine will prove to be a self-inflicted wound. The United States and our allies and partners will respond decisively.
Now pay attention to what he's doing here, because even though he says that Russia is not our enemy, if you listen to his rhetoric, he is making it seem like Russia is our enemy. He's making it seem like Russia they are the bad guys and Ukraine is the good guys. Now, you may say, well, how can that be? Why does he feel that way? What proof is there? The United States government has supplied weapons to Ukraine, to Nazis in the Ukraine. Let me say that again. The United States government has given lethal aid, weapons, and ammunition to Nazis in the Ukraine. He does not mention that once in this speech, and I've watched this speech twice. That is left out. How are you going to just leave out the fact that there's Nazis there that you are aiding? How can you not mention that? So in this speech, he's still trying to make it seem like the Ukraine, they're the good guys and Russia is the bad guys. And he does not tell you that there are Nazis there that the United States government is supporting. The United States is not good in this situation. We are not innocent. We are just as cruel and corrupt as we have always been. Joe Biden isn't going to tell you that. CNN isn't going to tell you that. MSNBC is not going to tell you that. This is why it's good to watch independent media.
The West is united and galvanized. Today, our NATO allies and the alliance is as unified and determined as it has ever been. And the source of our unbreakable strength continues to be the power, resilience, and universal appeal of our shared democratic values. Because this is about more than just Russia and Ukraine. It's about standing for what we believe in, for the future we want for our world,
It's also about a pipeline. It's not about standing for what we believe in. It's not about the future of our world. It is because there are resources there that we need. That is always the case. It is never about the women and the children, as many times as they would claim that it is. It is not. It is about resources that are there. Why did we get involved with Afghanistan? Because there's resources in Afghanistan. It is not about the people. He's trying to make it seem like we're doing the moral thing. We're not. There is always something in it for the United States government. This is why I'm anti-imperialist. This is why I'm anti-war. Because at the end of the day, the other side is worse off than they were before the United States intervened. Gonna go back in.
For liberty, the right of countless countries to choose their own destiny, and the right of people to determine their own futures. For the principle that a country can't change its neighbors' borders by force. That's our vision. And toward that end, I'm confident that vision, that freedom will prevail. If Russia proceeds, we will rally the world to oppose its aggression. The United States and our allies and partners around the world are ready to impose powerful sanctions on export controls, including actions that we did not pursue when Russia invaded Crimea in eastern Ukraine in 20.
This is where I'm going to come out. I'm not going to play that entire video, but he mentioned a word that I want you to pay very close attention to, and that word is sanctions. Now, you just heard Joe Biden say that if Russia invades, that the United States, that's something we tend to do a lot to other countries. I want to show you what some of those sanctions actually look like. Let's go to Afghanistan. For the people that defend sanctions that United States government does, you should not defend sanctions. We've done this to Cuba. We're doing this right now to Afghanistan, and I want to show you this because this is very important. U.S. policy is fueling Afghanistan's humanitarian crisis. Let's go all the way down. Let me show you the part I want to get to. U.S. policy is helping drive Afghanistan's humanitarian crisis. Many Afghanistan's current problems are intimately connected to the U.S. withdrawal from the country last year. Let me make this larger. Should have never been there in the first place, like I've said before. And the Taliban's ensuing takeover of the central government. Since then, U.S. sanctions and an abrupt end to international aid have wrecked Afghanistan's economy and sent it into a spiraling crisis. Let me say this again. U.S. sanctions and an abrupt end to an international aid have wrecked Afghanistan's economy and sent it spiraling into crisis. I'll go on. The U.S. and the UN have made some concessions to allow humanitarian aid to operate outside the auspices of the Taliban. The Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control granted some licenses to aid groups to operate in Afghanistan without running afoul of financial restrictions on other individuals and institutions in the country. But as experts have said, it is not nearly enough to bring the Afghan people anywhere close to the needed aid. And regardless of the OFAC licenses, the Afghan banking system is still essentially held hostage by sanctions against the Taliban. One more time, the Afghan banking system is still essentially held hostage by U.S. sanctions against the Taliban. People are starving in Afghanistan. There are pictures. I was going to show them on here, and then I decided not to because they're really appalling. People are starving. There's pictures of children with bloated bellies. Like the videos that used to see, the infomercials you used to see when we were growing up of the starving children. That's happening in Afghanistan because of the US government. This is another example of what happens when the US government intervenes in another country's ordeals. Before US intervention, the people in Afghanistan were better off. Now, people are starving. This is absolutely insane. And now you have the president of the United States threatening to issue sanctions on Russia. When does it end? When does it stop? How many times is the United States government going to do this? They are essentially starving people in Afghanistan, starving children. And this is why I told you it was never about the women and the children. If you care so much about those women and those children, why are you starving them? Where's that compassion? You have to understand that our involvement does not help these countries. It just makes it worse. We were there for resources. One of those resources was opium, not to protect the people. I'm going to go to some of the comments in the chat. Thank you so much for the super chat, Troy and KC Waking Red, who's also a Sabby member. Say it ain't so, Joe. Thanks so much for the super chat, Kyle, who's also a Sabby member. It's hard to bluff when you're showing your whole cards. Let's go, Brandon. Thank you for the super chat, Troy. The Biden sales pitch. Who's he trying to convince? The U.S. public? Who? Total sales job, con job, used car sales tactics. Lawrence said, and by the way, Biden stole $7 billion in frozen Afghani funds. The Afghani people are starving and the thief with their money is in the White House. Joy Duncan said, please talk about Afghanistan and the deplorable situations those poor people are facing. No more Hassan. Yeah, no more Hassan. Troy, thank you for the super chat. By the way, sanctioning a country, freezing assets is an act of war. Thank you so much for saying that. War is not just about physical violence. There's also financial violence. This is so corrupt. This is so wrong. And now we have Joe Biden is threatening to do it again. Now, some of you may be wondering, why in the world would he try to escalate tensions with Russia right now? Why is he trying to poke the bear? I think he's trying to pull a George W. Bush. Remember when George W. Bush had low poll numbers? All of a sudden, it was time to go to war. Joe Biden's poll numbers right now are absolutely abysmal. They just continue to decrease. The American people are not happy. So what better way to ensure that you will be reelected come 2024 than to let's start a conflict abroad. Let's start a war, because what happens is the American people don't want to remove a sitting president during a war or during some type of conflict. This is what happened with W. I remember very well. Very well. Yes, Troy is right. Clinton, Bosnia too. So he's really trying to pull the W card right now? Really? That's my take on that. I'm going to go back into the article. There's some more I want you to see. Sanctions are intended to have a chilling effect in that sanctions will always go beyond the face of the text. Now, that's coming from Adam Weinstein, a research fellow with the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Banks and businesses don't want to risk dealing with places or sectors under economic restrictions from the United States for fear that they'll violate a prohibition and be subject to sanctions themselves. You see how this works, you guys? You see how this works? So nobody else wants to deal with them. It might hurt them. This is how this works. To that end, more than 40 members of the Progressive Caucus, they're a joke, sent a letter to President Joe Biden last month urging him to release the frozen currency reserves of the Central Bank of Afghanistan. Yes, because all we need is another stern letter, because that has made Joe Biden act so swiftly before. No increase in food and medical aid can compensate for the macroeconomic harm of soaring prices of basic commodities, a banking collapse, a balance of payments crisis, a freeze on civil servant salaries, and other severe consequences that are rippling through Afghan society, harming the most vulnerable. So far, however, no policy shift has been forthcoming. As of earlier this month, the U.S. has pledged an additional $308 million in humanitarian aid to Afghanistan, but the Afghan Central Bank reserves remains frozen. Essentially, this is similar to what Justin Trudeau is threatening to do to the protesters in Canada right now. He's threatening to freeze their funds, their assets. If you don't have money, you can't buy food. If you can't buy food, you can't eat. Then you starve. They are slowly killing them. Do you guys hear? They are slowly killing them. How is this ethical? Why aren't more people talking about this? This is very, very concerning. If they can do that to them, what makes you think they won't do something like that to us? Going back in. While some aid is getting to Afghans via the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and the WFP, those organizations often have stringent requirements regarding who qualifies for aid. What do you know? It's means tested. Those of you who have been watching me for a while, you know I loathe means test. I hate it. When it comes to giving people aid, just give it to everybody. I felt the same way about the stimulus checks. In a nation on the brink, many who are desperate need don't qualify for aid because they don't fit the program's focus area or because they're not poor enough. Isn't that insane? Does that sound familiar to you? We have a similar problem here, right, in the United States. We have people here where they fit into this weird income bracket where they don't make enough to survive, but they don't make too little to receive any type of aid from the United States government. There are people like that in this country. So those people a lot of times have to work 2 jobs, have to pick up shifts because they fall into that weird income bracket. Not enough to survive, but you're not too poor for us to help you. Isn't that something? Yes, Danielle was right. Poverty wages. Poverty wages. Absolutely. Steve said, Sabby, they are slowly doing it to us as well. Yep. You guys see? So when people refer to a lot of these other countries as third world countries or they're poor countries, a lot of times those countries are not poor. They're rich in resources, which we take, by the way. We steal them. We steal their resources and the people there become really poor, worse off than they were before. We've done it to a lot of countries. Look up the history of Haiti. Then you'll understand why people in Haiti struggle so much. Thanks for that comment on Rockfin, Gene. Countries have to stand together and defy U.S. sanctions and help those countries. I agree. But we need more people to talk about this because most people that I will tell this to, they are not aware that this is even going on. Most of my friends, family members, they have no idea that this is happening right now. And that's the failure of mainstream media. But like I told you before, they're bought and paid for as well. One more thing I want to mention in this article. The chilling effects of sanctions is keeping businesses and banks from actually engaging with the economy. As House Democrats pointed out in their letter last month, oh God, another letter, relatively simple steps like issuing letters to international businesses, assuring them that they're not violating US sanctions could help alleviate the crisis and shore up the Afghan private sector, but the US Treasury has yet to do so. So, there you go. They could do that. They don't even want to do that. Joe Biden doesn't even want to do that. I was on Ryan Knight's podcast recently, Amped Up with Ryan Knight. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but you should definitely check it out. And the question about Joe Biden came up. And I told Ryan that Joe Biden is not in office to help out any of us. Joe Biden is there to keep the status quo. He is there to help Wall Street, corporations, the banks. He is not there to help the American people. And I think the sooner that people understand how this system works. So there are a lot of people, kind of been coming at me like, what do you mean you're not going to vote Democrat? Well, that means you're going to vote Republican. No, I'm not going to vote for either one. And the reason why is because once you understand how the system works, once you understand who is really making the decisions, who is really controlling what is going on in this country, you will realize that voting for Democrats or voting for Republicans is not going to help the American people. I am on a different path now. Now, there's an event coming up tonight at 7:00, and it's an event for candidates, progressive candidates. And I want to go ahead and tell you this. Some of those people I've interviewed on the show, I liked all of them. I have nothing against the candidates, nothing. The problem that I have is the system that they are going into. The system is not designed for them to win. The system is not designed for them to succeed. Because let me tell you what I think is going to happen. For those who do win, yes, it will increase numbers in the House for progressives, right? But I've told you before, we already have the numbers that we need now, and they're not doing what they need to do to hold up legislation. They're not voting in such a way that would really mean something. They're not pushing back. They're not fighting. So let's say we increase that number in the House. Okay. Here's what I predict is going to happen. Now you have a new group of progressives that are in the House. And let's say they're not willing to put up with Nancy Pelosi's bullying. Let's say they're not willing to go along with the status quo. Let's say they decide to be more assertive, more aggressive, and push back. Now, if you add them to the squad, the group that is already there, that should increase the numbers when it comes to passing legislation or holding up legislation, right? Or blocking legislation. What I think is going to happen, if you get those in that are willing to fight and stand up to Nancy Pelosi and Wall Street and all of them that are there, I believe that the progressives who were in before them, the squad, I believe that they will not hold the line. I believe that they will still vote the way that Nancy Pelosi tells them to vote. And once again, we will be back at this standstill where we had increased the numbers of progressives in the House, but nothing is still getting passed or they're not blocking anything because now you have a new group in that's willing to fight, but the squad is still not willing to. Do you see what I mean? That is what I think is going to happen. I could be wrong. I'm not psychic. But I mean, the squad's been in there for a while. It's not like this is their first year. And they're not fighting and they're not pushing back. AOC is a lost cause. I'm going to get into that story in a minute. So don't look to her. She's backing Nancy Pelosi. So I'm going to go into that story. But I really think that that is the problem that they may run into. Now we have the numbers, right? That we need. We already have the numbers. So we increase the numbers, but let's say 3 progressives get in. Let's be more generous. Let's say 4 progressives get in. Now you got 4 that's willing to fight and push back, but the other 7 don't. Do you see how this works? The other 7, the squad. We'll just go ahead and include Rokana and Pramila Jayapal in this too, because they still claim to be progressive. The other 7 members will not fight. They won't do it. They're not doing it now. So then what's going to happen is then you have fewer numbers, even though you have more. Does that make sense? Do you guys get what I'm saying? We'll end up with fewer votes, even though we have more progressives. Like I said before, I've interviewed a lot of those people on the show. The problem is not with them. The problem is the system. You have to find a way to get the money out. And I don't hear anybody talking about a strategy for that. I want to hear people talk about that. What is the strategy to get the money out of politics? What is the strategy to prevent these politicians from being bought and paid? Let's talk about that. I understand they want to get more progressives in. I get it. Listen, I like all of these people. I've met all of them. But if the money is still there, nothing is going to change. This is what controls everything. It is the money. AOC says she doesn't take corporate PAC money. Cori Bush says she doesn't take corporate PAC money. Okay. But Nancy Pelosi does. Do you see what I'm saying? Who's the Speaker of the House? Do you see what all those other Democrats that are in the House, the majority of them do take corporate money. The majority of them do back Wall Street. And I know people will say, well, that's why we need to increase the numbers. I am telling you, that is my prediction. I have a strong feeling about this. That then is going to be another reason. There is always a reason, guys. Have you noticed this? It's the Senate parliamentarian. It's Sinema and Joe Manchin. It's Biden doesn't have executive order to do this. There's always a reason as to why they can't help the people. And none of them are telling you the real reason. The real reason is because of the money. They're all bought and paid for. That is the problem. So even if you run as a grassroots candidate, when you go in, you are going into a party that is owned by Wall Street. I'm going to say this again. You are going into a party that is owned by Wall Street. You are not going to change the party. The party is either going to change you or you are going to be pushed out. And they've pushed people out before. Cynthia McKinney, Ralph Nader. They don't let people stay who really want to fight. They'll even try to primary challenge you with someone on their side. They will raise money for the establishment candidate to go against you. Now, Nancy Pelosi just told you herself on Face the Nation, defund the police is not the phrase of the Democratic Party. She said that is not where the Democratic Party is going. So Nancy Pelosi is speaking for the entire party. Cori Bush stands alone. Where's the squad? Do you guys see? Let's get into AOC. Let's get into this story. Let me shout out these super chats really quick. Thanks so much for the super chat, Troy. Sabs, oh yeah, I got to give you my email address in case YouTube gets even weirder. Rockfin reminded me. Yes, guys, definitely sign up for my email list. That gives you live stream alerts so you'll know when I go live. Hi, Robin. Sup. Everyone give Robin a shout out. She does a lot of the graphics for RBN. She's awesome. Thanks for the super chat, The Traveler. Why would the DNC let that happen? The DNC argued in court that they can pick whoever since they are a private corporation. It's a corporation. It's not... It just, thanks for the super chat, Troy. Remember Norman Goldman, who used to appear on Ed Schultz's show? Later, he got his own podcast and called us political terrorists for refusing to vote for the Democratic Party. See, It's already, this is all expected. Thank you so much for the super chat. Thanks for the super chat, Steve. Sabby, the Democrats will lose both houses in the midterms, so electing a few more progressives really doesn't matter. Vote third party. That is a good point, Steve. Thank you so much. So my thing is this. Look, if you want to watch the stream tonight, watch the stream tonight. I'm not going to tell you what you can and cannot watch. I'm just telling you how I feel about it. Again, I have nothing against any of those people involved with this event. I feel like where we are right now in this country with this pandemic, with people being unhoused and more people being unemployed, maybe we should do some type of event to raise money for people in this country. Because I told you, if I could do it all over again, all that money that I donated to Bernie and AOC, I would take that money back and I would donate it to mutual aid. But can't go back and change the past. But I can change the future. So Kevin said Chris Hedges, the writer for Ralph Nader's speeches. Yep. Chris Hedges told you guys. Chris Hedges has articles. I don't know if you follow him, but he has articles about this, that it just doesn't, it's the money is the big problem. And I feel like Bernie Sanders told us this. Bernie Sanders told us this. And now we have people pretending like this is not an issue. It's an issue. That is the number one problem. And that problem, if you don't get the money out, nothing will change. I just wish more people would say that. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to tell you guys to go donate money to candidates. I'm not going to do that. All right, let's get into this AOC story because we got to talk about this. And this actually will show you exactly what I was talking about. So a subscriber sent this to me. Thank you so much for doing that. AOC had an interview with New York Magazine. There is one part here that I want to show you that is incredibly important. Is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez an insider now? After 3 years of the halls of power, she's seen the shit show up close and hasn't given up on her vision for how to change it. Let me tell you something a little bit about her vision, because this is the part, the person who sent this to me, this is the part that they emphasized. So let me scroll down. Here we go. I'm going to make this large because I want all of you to see this, because this is not something that Sabby is assuming. This is right here. Go away in this article. Okay. Oh, where did it go? Hold on. Here we go. When you are asked questions about whether or not Nancy Pelosi should stay as speaker, pay close attention here, guys. Here we go. When you're asked questions about the rather advanced ages of Steny Hoyer, Jim Clyburn, and Chuck Schumer, does it make a difference? You're saying it's structural, it's not generational. This is AOC's response. It's both. The reason we have this generational situation that we do is also in part due to our structures. The generational aspect of things is absolutely pertinent to the kind of decision making. There is this worldview, this appeal of a time past that I think sometimes guides decision making. President Biden thought that he could talk with Manchin like an old pal and bring him along. And frankly, that was what the White House strategy was in terms of what they communicated to us. That's how they tried to sell passage of not even half a loaf but a tenth of a loaf. It was, we promise we'll be able to bring them along. There is this idea that this is just a temporary thing and we'll get back to that. But I grew up my entire life in this mess. There's no nostalgia for a time when Washington worked for my life. That's not completely true. I'm going to get into that story in just a second. That is not completely true. Here's the kicker. Is it healthy or not for the Democratic Party for Nancy Pelosi to remain in place as the speaker, as leader of the Democratic caucus in the House. Hold on to your seats for this one. It's really all about a specific moment that we're in. We are in such a delicate moment of the day today, particularly with the threats to our democracy. I believe that at the end of the day, there's going to be a generational change in our leadership. That is just a simple fact. Now, when that particular moment happens, I think it's a larger question of conditions and circumstance. You guys see this? Is it healthy or not for the Democratic Party, for Nancy Pelosi to remain in place as the speaker? Yes or no? Yes or no? Notice how she kind of skirted around that. She didn't really give a yes or no. Look at this word salad. We are in such a delicate moment of the day to day, particularly with the threats to our democracy. No one asked you about that. He asked you a simple question, a straightforward question. Now, when that particular moment happens, I think it's a larger question of conditions and circumstance. Guys, she's playing you. They go on to say, you don't want to go near this one. Her response is, it's a tough question. Is that a tough question? I'm going to ask you guys, hold on. Is that a tough question? Let me ask you guys, do you think it is healthy for Nancy Pelosi to remain Speaker of the House? I'll look to the chat. I just don't understand. How is that a tough question? Didn't seem tough to me. Didn't seem tough to me. Comrade Cam says no. No, I'm looking at the answers. I'm looking at the answers in the chat. You guys are like, no. Let's go back in. Justin said she's giving all the answers or non-answers a compromised rep would make. Exactly. She's careful with what she says because she doesn't want to jeopardize her political career. That's what this is about. That's what this is about. Let's go back in. You don't want to go near this one. She says, it's a tough question. It's not even just a question of the speaker. It's a question of our caucus. I wish the Democratic Party had more stones. I wish our party was capable of truly supporting bold leadership that can address root causes. Do you guys see this? I wish the Democratic Party had more stones. You already have enough progressives in the House to make change with legislation, and you're not doing it. Do you guys see what's happening here? The Democratic Party has a lot of power. She's asking for more stones. You got all the people, the numbers that you need right now to vote no or yes, where you could have really changed the outcome of legislation, the Capitol Police budget, forcing the vote, and you've done nothing. So now it's the party's fault. You see what I mean? It's a tough question. They go on to say, is it that representatives don't have the stones, or do you want a different public option, as it were? In other words, for example, take defund the police as a policy demand. Certainly in New York City, no one is talking about that now as a matter of protest. Yes. As activism? Yes. But we have a new mayor, Eric Adams, who is anything but defund the police. Who are you disappointed in? She goes on to say, I'm still disappointed in leadership and in my colleagues because ultimately these conversations about defund or this, that, or the other are what is happening in public and popular conversations. Our job is to be able to engage in that conversation, to read what is happening, and to be able to develop a vision and translate it into a course of action. All too often, I believe that a lot of our decisions are reactive to public discourse instead of responsive to public discourse. And so just because there's this large conversation about defund the police coming from the streets, The response was to immediately respond to it with fear, with pooing, with this isn't us with an arm's distance. So then what is the vision? That's where I think the party struggles. So again, AOC, if you feel that way, if you feel so strongly about defund the police, why aren't you out there backing Cori Bush? Why is Cori Bush standing alone? This is just, I can't make this up. Now I want to show you something, because there was something that she said that just really irked me, and I had a feeling this was going to come up. I want to remind you who AOC really is, because when AOC was running for office, they talked about her being this bartender. Now, for those of you who don't know, I worked at Boston University until last month, actually. So I knew a little bit more about her because she went to BU than some of you did. Even some of you that watched independent media, because there were parts that were kind of hidden in reference to her background that those of us who were kind of local, we kind of knew. Those of us in the BU community kind of knew because she was an alum. Listen to this. The truth about AOC. The inside story of how in just 1 year, Sandy, the bartender, became a lawmaker who triggers both parties. You see what I mean? Sandy, the bartender. This was the story they led with when talking about AOC. She was a bartender. She grew up in the Bronx. I happen to know differently. Listen to this. AOC was a bartender when she pulled together a scrappy populist campaign, pulled together for U.S. Congress and stunned the political world by unseating a powerful incumbent Democrat. I want to remind everyone that AOC, let me go in here a little bit bigger for you. I want to remind everyone that AOC worked with Ted Kennedy. I didn't know that when she was running. All I knew about her background was that she grew up in the Bronx and she went to BU and she was a bartender. And there was something about the bartender thing and the BU connection that really just didn't sit well with me, because the students that graduate from Boston University, having worked there for over 5 years, the students that graduate from BU, they usually go on to pretty good jobs. It's not bartending. I know, I've seen the career placement numbers. So that was kind of weird to me. I'm going to get into that in just a second. So then it goes on to say, let me go down here because this is the part I want to show you. It's towards the bottom. It's just like, I don't know why I fell for it at the time, but I realized looking back on it, like she was really a fraud. Listen to this. This is what she said at BU, and Ken Elmore introduced her. She said, I didn't understand why people called me an activist. I felt like I was just saying things that were very common sense. I would just say, hey, kids in the Bronx should have a good education. And they'd be like, oh, she's an activist. It's just, it's really interesting. Listen to this part. So AOC's father died of lung cancer when she was a sophomore in college. He was 48. Her Puerto Rican mother cleaned houses to support 2 kids, but the money wasn't enough and she had to fight off for closure. One of the things I've noticed that's often been left out, and this was mentioned later on after she won, they don't tell you that AOC's dad was an architect. Not only was he an architect, but he was the president of the company. Why wasn't that mentioned when she was running for office? Because they wanted us to have this story of, oh, look at this poor Latina from the Bronx. She came out of poverty and went to BU and she won and now she's a congresswoman. That was the narrative they told. She was a bartender and she did it, so you can do it too. Now, does that story sound more exciting? Absolutely. Absolutely. But that wasn't the truth. That wasn't the truth. So my theory is, and this was something I noticed back then as well, it seemed like to me they put way more focus on AOC when the Justice Democrats were running than they did the other Justice Democrats. I just call it like I see it. She was supposed to be the star. She was supposed to be the one that was actually going to get in. And they make it seem like she didn't have any political connections, but she did have political connections. Now, they bring up the bartender story, but they don't tell you that AOC had a startup. How many of you know this? I'll show you. This is just, I feel like she was fooling us all along. AOC had a startup. The surprising entrepreneurial roots of Democrats' rising star, AOC. Here we go. Let me go down to where they talk about the company. It's a long article, excuse me. Oh, here we go. Okay. Because I knew, like I said, when she went to BU, I'm like, the BU kids usually go on to do a lot of things. Something about that just sound off to me. So here we go. We seek to develop and identify literature in urban areas. So this was her startup. I'm not saying there's anything bad about this startup. I'm not saying there's anything bad about having a startup. What I'm saying is I think it was odd that was left out of her story and they made it seem like she was just a struggling bartender. That was not true. She launched a publishing venture through a local startup network, Sunshine Bronx Business Incubator, which charges $195 per month for shared workspace and business advice. She went on to encourage investors to support Bronx businesses. I have no problem with that either. Rather than think of it as somewhere to run from, the Bronx is somewhere to invest. In an interview with New York Daily, AOC reportedly spent $1,000 to get her business off the ground and further advocated for a New York City bill that will double tax deductions for new business startup costs, bringing that figure to $5,000 from $5,000 to $10,000. The National Hispanic Institute even named AOC their social entrepreneur in residence, recognizing her commitment to the company and greater Hispanic community. It's that background in particular that gives hope to the business community in New York. So, again, I have no problem with the fact that she started a startup. I have a problem with the fact that was left out of her story. And they tried to make it seem like she was this poor, struggling girl from the Bronx who was a bartender. There's something flawed with that. There's something flawed with that story and that narrative. I didn't know for a long time that she didn't really grow up in the Bronx per se. I think she started out there, but they moved to York. It's a suburb in New York. They moved to a town. I have it here. It was in Westchester County. I know where that's at. I'm familiar with it. I used to live in New York. And it was so she could attend better schools. So her parents bought a house in Westchester. That's fine. That's fine. This is the thing. I have no problem with any of that. But my question was, why was this left out? And look at this in this article here. This is interesting. Listen to this. AOC took a lot of criticism for allegedly misrepresenting her childhood. Her critics said that AOC had lied about her family's wealth. AOC said that, in fact, she grew up between two worlds and that even though she went to school in Yorktown, she never lost sight of her Bronx roots. That is totally fine. Again, no problem with that. My problem was the lies. So I feel like, to me, AOC feels like a fraud. That is the problem that I have. And then I see the way that she is behaving in Congress, and she is not fighting for us. And that was a progressive who some of us on here canvassed for, who some of us donated money to. So when you think about this event that's happening tonight at 7 o'clock, again, I told you, I have no problem with the people. The problem is the money, the system they're going into, and the other problem is the fact that we do not have a good precedent. Because the group that came before them, the squad, the Justice Democrats, they have not set a good precedent. They have made it tough for the ones who are running now. I'm going to go to some of the comments in the chat. Lawrence said, you have to show the Democratic Party that you are ready and willing not to vote for them. That is the only way they will listen to you. Thank you, Lawrence. And Lawrence O'Donnell mentioned that as well. Robin said, that's right, Sabby. What difference does it make where someone pees in the pool? Sabby said, come on, or excuse me, Laura said, come on, Sabby. AOC might cry if you hold her accountable. Troy, thanks so much for the super chat. Sabby, tongue in cheek, you're criticizing AOC. That's violence. Thanks for the super chat. Colin says, this letter that comes after A and ends in itch didn't answer the damn question. I hear you. Thanks so much, Colin. Delthea said, if Obama had said to Americans in 2009 to meet him at the Capitol and make Congress vote for real health care, thousands, if not millions, would have come. AOC could do the same, but she won't. No, she won't. And that's what's unfortunate. She has a large platform, particularly on Twitter. All she has to do is send out a tweet and thousands of people would be there. That's the thing. That's the thing. I want to go into my last story because I'm looking at the time here. And this one is about Briahna Joy Gray. And man, oh man, is she really they are really coming after her on Twitter the past day or so. I'm going to show you the video that's in question about that as well. So this was from Bri earlier. I think this thread may be longer now. But she said, stop bullying Black women. Eve, my Black body is under assault. And during Black History Month, no less. SMH. Now, where is this coming from? So this came from Eve Barlow. And Eve said, your need to dismiss and bully a Jewish female activist who spends more time speaking on this matter than you can comprehend is deplorable and indicative of a bias you seem to have about punching up at Jews. Oh my God, you guys. Okay. So I'm just following the thread back and then I'm going to show you the video that they're talking about. So Eve was responding to a tweet that Bri had here where she said, yes, this week on the pod, I, a Black person, advocated for Nazi race science along with my Jewish co-hosts. Of course, she's being sarcastic here. Anyway, check out this terrific episode in which we discuss Whoopi's suspension and whether Blacks and Jews should adopt understanding of race invented by our oppressors. And Jordan said this week on the pod, Nazi race science. People really took this the wrong way. Like that thread, I think, is still going on. This was the tweet here that started it. And this was Bri posting her "Are Jews white? Does it matter?" This is an episode from Call-In, from that app Call-In that she had, which people can connect their Call-In show to their YouTube show. So you might see the video version on YouTube and then see like the audio version on Call-In, but people can call in and ask questions. So she just announced basically, like, I'm talking about "Are Jews white? Does it matter?" on the Debrief with Briahna Joy Gray. Basically just advertising her show. People lost it. This person said, this isn't your discussion to have. I could tell they obviously didn't listen to the show. This person said, or what's her name? Amy said, and with a single sentence, you just erased all the Jews who are Black or Asian or any other race, but go on with your bullshit. Jeez. Sorry. John said, stupid and unnecessary question. Yes, some of us Jews are white, and also some of us are not white. I can't read this person's name, but they said, why is this even a discussion? Jews aren't white. We're Middle Eastern, just like Arabs aren't white, but rather Middle Eastern. The Jewish experience isn't white either. Saint Laurent said, opening a future episodes with hello friends. Life is a Grift said, sounds like another whoopee discussion of pure ignorance. So, as you can see, and I don't know, let me check and see if anything else was said after this. This is why I told you guys a lot of times I just don't respond to, like, when people attack me on Twitter, and I get attacked a lot. I really don't care though. But I don't respond. I do not respond. I don't. I'm just like, whatever, dude. I don't have time for it. But here's another one. They're trying to get me censored from Twitter by reporting me for anti-Semitism. By the way, people are calling her anti-Semitic now. You see how this escalated very quickly? Guess they really don't want you to hear this excellent podcast. So I guess this is a complaint that she received from Twitter. Oh, let me go back that way. It was bigger. Hello. Twitter is required by German law to provide notice to users who are reported by people from Germany via the Network Enforcement Act reporting flow. We have received a complaint regarding your account for the following content. Tweet text, cry victim, LOL, getting a strong, there can only be one true victim, and it's not black people vibe here, which is the opposite of the solidaristic vibes we were cultivating on the show that none of these people watch. By the way, I could tell they didn't watch the show either, because I did watch it and I'm like, wow, they really took this to another level. Did they even listen to what was said in the show? Some people were saying like she should have had Jewish people on the show. Jewish people were on the show. So that's how I knew they didn't watch the show. So it was just really weird, very strange. But let me go back into this because they really came after her, man. It goes on to say, we have investigated the reported content and found that it is not subject to removal under the Twitter rules or German law. So she was reported. And by the way, you guys, let me tell you something. This has been going on Twitter a lot recently, where there's these DM groups and they target certain people and they'll mass report you. It's happened to people that I know. And what happens is, I think if you get enough people to do it, then Twitter can like either take you down or suspend you for like a week or whatever. But that's been happening on Twitter. That's why I told you a lot of times I just ignore. I don't have time. But so yeah, they reported her. And I don't think I can play the call-in one because that might be copyright, but I'm going to play the video, part of the video, so you can see that. But Jesus, like, I don't even know what to say. I'm not shocked though. I'll be honest with you, just because Twitter sometimes can be a very toxic place. I'll just be honest with you. And it's easy to buy into that. So let me play the video that you all can see. And I want you to tell me if you think there's anything wrong with this conversation. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Boy, let me tell you, man, they really will come after you when they're ready. They will come after you. So what they're referring to is canceling Whoopi for racism with Batya, Ungar, Sargon, and Thomas. I can't see the rest of Thomas's name, but here we go.
Batya, if you have interrogated that question at all, what do you think at bottom was the problem with Whoopi Goldberg's with statements on The View?
So, like a lot of Jews I know, my feelings and thoughts about it have evolved in the, the weeks since it happened. At first it was very shocking and horrifying, but then of course, talking to Black friends and talking to other Jewish friends. Okay, so what I've arrived at, what I think is, my current understanding of her comments, which obviously I reserve the right to change as somebody who thinks it's really important to change your mind when you're wrong. So I think that this is how I would summarize it right now. I think she made 3 mistakes and got at 2 potentially very true things. So the mistakes I think she made are what you mentioned already. The Holocaust, of course, was about race. Hitler thought Jews were, an inferior race, right? Just historically completely wrong. Of course, you can have bigotry against minorities who are not Black. That also seemed to be precluded by what she was saying. So I'd say that was the second mistake. She seemed to be making that kind of, I'm sorry, forgive me, but like that woke, analysis where, oppression and skin color are correlated. And that is the definition of, oppression, victimization, and people who have lighter skin cannot be racially oppressed or ethnically oppressed, which is not true. And the third thing I would say is, Jews are not white. So, Jewishness is not a race. Most Jews do not consider themselves to be a race because, as I'm sure you guys agree, race is a social construct. Jewishness is difficult to define because Jews predate the modern categories we have for thinking about these things,
Okay. Now, if you notice, the young woman Batya, she was the one who asked the question. She was the one, that addressed the question. She was the one that said Jewish people are not white. So that didn't come from Bree. That came from her guest, who is Jewish. And that's why I thought to myself, all the people that were attacking her, it was obvious that they didn't watch this video. Because they were saying, how about you bring on Jewish people and have them talk about it? There we go. There's Jewish people there on the video. So that was very strange to me. And she's the one who brought it up. So I'll go back into the video and I'll tell you what else I think about this.
So it's sort of the definition of Judaism sits uncomfortably at the intersection of an ethnicity and a history and a religion and a culture and a language and, a set of texts, right? It's a difficult thing to define, but most Jews would not call themselves white. They might call themselves white passing if they have white skin like me. I sometimes say that, but the reduction of Jews into whiteness is something that many Jews find extremely offensive. Now, what I want to say, and now I want to get to the 2 things I think that she very clumsily perhaps was gesturing at.
So that part was actually pretty interesting because my Jewish friends do call themselves white. They do consider themselves to be white. So I don't know. But I mean, people, it's just like with Black people. Like Black people are not a monolith. Not everybody thinks the same. People have different opinions. But that was interesting to hear.
That I think are really important to bring up and difficult to bring up. So the first is anti-Black racism is different. And it's worse in America. The history is worse. The current way in which we are still failing descendants of slaves is worse than what any other ethnic minority suffers in America, certainly Jews. I mean, American Jews in this generation, we are the luckiest Jews to ever walk planet Earth. It's ridiculous to compare what Jews go through today, even as anti-Semitism is on the rise, with forms of anti-Black racism that are still state-sponsored. So that's the first thing that I think she was clumsily gesturing at, which is what they do to us is different, like at some qualitative level. And I think that I agree with her on that, even though I think she did not say it very well. And the second point, which I think is probably even more controversial, is this, and then I'm going to cede the floor back to you guys. I think that there is a kind of a stolen valor happening when you have these groups that represent different minorities, Jews, immigrants, Muslims, Asians, Latinos, all sort of trying to get on this, intersectional train and say, look, fighting oppression for everybody is intertwined. And I just think that that's ridiculous. Because again, like what we did and what we continue to do to the American descendants of slaves is qualitatively different. It is qualitatively worse. And to the extent that she was trying to point that out, that there is this kind of, you keep asking the Black community to lend its voice to these other things that are bad. They're bad. Anti-Semitism's bad. But come on, like, where are our priorities, right? When we're thinking of levels of, oppression that still remains. So I think that those are the two things that, clumsily she was gesturing at that I do think are important to talk about.
I want to chime in here and talk about this from a local perspective. What she just mentioned about the difference between oppression between Jewish people and Black people. I was thinking about this after I watched this video. There's a neighborhood right next to Boston. Looks like it actually is Boston, but it's not. It's called Brookline. And Brookline is a predominantly Jewish neighborhood. I think it's been that way for a long time. And I thought to myself, yes, there have been, anti-Semitic graffiti in Brookline. Like those things have happened. But then I thought about the type of oppression that happened in Black neighborhoods in Boston, like Roxbury or parts of Dorchester, because not all Dorchester is Black community. Mattapan, I thought about that. And I had to say to myself, yes, there's discrimination that happens to both groups. But one of the things I noticed when we talk about oppression, if you go into Brookline, Brookline is very wealthy. It is a wealthy community. I can't afford to buy a house there. Most people I know cannot. There's a lot of older money there too, where people have generational wealth that's been passed down. The schools are excellent, phenomenal. And yet, if I were to go into Roxbury or Dorchester or Mattapan, and then you see the disparities, you see systemic disparities. The schools are not good. There's cops all the time patrolling those neighborhoods. The crime rate is high because that links back to poverty. I told you, poverty and crime are connected most of the time. And I have to say that I think something happened in this country when it comes to Black people and when it comes to like the Jewish community. Because I know, Jewish people went through the Holocaust, which is tragic and terrible. But Jewish people did receive reparations from Germany. Jewish organizations received reparations from Germany. Black people never did. So when slaves were freed, there were all of these tools that white people had that they didn't have. Like, it was illegal for slaves to learn how to read and write. So you were basically starting from the bottom. But what I've noticed, especially up here in the Northeast, a lot of these communities that I've lived in the Jewish neighborhood when I lived in Brooklyn. It seemed like the Jewish communities, they built up their own communities, schools, and businesses, and they're still around. When Black people tried to do this, there were multiple Black Wall Streets. They were burned to the ground. In fact, every time, because the Black population in the United States was actually the strongest during Reconstruction. A lot of people don't talk about that sometimes, but there were different like Black communities in the United States that were able to build up wealth, like in those communities where like all the businesses were Black owned. So the dollar constantly turned in that community, right? They were all burned to the ground. It wasn't just Tulsa. So, I mean, people know how I feel about reparations. I do think Black people need reparations. But when I look at the differences, I see a lot of systemic issues when it comes to the Black community, like the public education system. That needs to be improved. But if you're going to fund the public education system based on property taxes, that's the big problem. That's the big problem. I don't want people to go call me anti-Semitic. That is not where I'm at all. But I did want to talk about the differences that I see. I think that's important to note. But let me go back into the video.
So, I mean, there's a lot there, and I want to circle back to some of it. But I want to get your read on one of the first things. I want to get your read, Thomas, on one of the first things that Batya said, which was this idea that Jews aren't white and don't have a self-perception of white as being white. And I was with you so much, Batya, through a lot of that. But it does seem to me in an American context, in particular, I mean, that's the only context I can really speak to. I don't think that people are looking at, high-profile folks. Jared Kushner, for some reason, is the first name that pops into my head. Barbara Streisand, whomever, and thinking that person isn't white. I mean, Thomas, you make so much, you talk and write so much about these questions. When you think about race in America, are you encountering a conception of Jewish people that is non-white? Or is it white and an ethnic identifier on top of it, the same way you have like white Latinos, let's say?
Well, no, it's different than white Latinos. I mean, this idea of monolithic whiteness is newish. It's not so old. It's not so old that there are not people living who can remember a time when their grandparents could tell them that Irish and Italians were not participating in what we now think of as like seamless kind of monolithic whiteness.
Certainly historically.
You were also in,
and I would say
20th century.
Sure, but I would say also, there's literature, the book famous, Becoming White or whatever it is, where Jews, Italians, a lot of different people were considered not white. But today, I mean, what is your
today? There's a concept of monolithic whiteness that is new. It's kind of strange. I have a lot of problems with it because I think it flattens and erases enormous ethnic and cultural and historical differences. I actually did a podcast a long time ago with Mark Oppenheimer and Alana Newhouse at Tablet. I was asking them if they consider themselves white, and they both rejected that they were white. And that was something that I would encourage more Jews and other kind of ethnicized white people to do more in speech and language, is to assert a kind of difference that subverts this monolithic identity. I also was really, and this is maybe getting on a tangent, but I really liked what ADOS was doing when they were saying, we want to not have monolithic blackness, and we want to say that there are ethnic differences with real historical trajectories, and so that a Jamaican is not the same as a 13th generation sharecropper from Louisiana or Mississippi. I think that these distinctions matter. I think that race itself is a mistake. Coming out of plantation logic and domination for economic purposes. And so that all of these things should make us pause and think, why are these words so fuzzy? Why do they mean so many different things to different people? And what would it do to us if we had much more sophisticated and specific ways of talking about ourselves that didn't fall into the kind of easy rhetoric of, well, the Holocaust was white on white violence. I think we need a much better conversation than that. So Whoopi definitely erred, but she did stumble into something that was poignant. And I think that's why we're still talking about it now.
Well, Thomas,
So that's interesting. I'm gonna go to some of the comments, and I have something I want to say about this. Thanks so much, LPA Film. You're nailing it, Sabby. This is what no one talks about when it comes to reparations. Yeah, I think when how my mind goes there when someone mentions oppression, I mean, as a Black person, I think about these systemic issues. There is racism everywhere. I mean, look, I've lived overseas. I've lived in the United States, North, South. I've lived in different places. And one thing I can tell you is racism is everywhere. It doesn't matter. It's not, racism doesn't have a home to a specific region. And I want to say that because when I lived in the South, people used to say like, oh, well, the South is really racist. And I moved up North and I realized people are racist here too. So it doesn't have a specific home per se. And I've seen these things happen. I've seen people, hateful things said to people who were Jewish, of course, Black, in my own experiences being Black, some of the Asian, especially some of the students that come here to Boston, I've seen some of the things that have been said to them. So it happens to a lot of us. But I think what's important to think about is the systemic issues, because it is difficult to find a way out of that. How do you beat a system that is designed to work against you? Now, that doesn't happen with everybody. There's always exceptions where some people have found a way to get out of that system, right? But it doesn't happen for the majority. And I've said this multiple times too, that it is really hard to get out of poverty. This is why you have generations of, just like you have generations of wealth, you have generations of poverty. It is difficult to get out of it if you don't get help from somebody else. It's hard, right? So I think we need to focus on the systemic issues when we're talking about racial issues in this country. I think that helps a lot. Noli D, thanks so much for the super chat. She knew what that title would do. I don't feel sorry for her. That title was pure bait to get people to hit the hornet's nest. Ouch. Noli D. Oh boy. Tony Plow said, my question is, how could Whoopi think that people wouldn't be offended? Whoopi has said some cringe that, look, let me tell you, Tony, Whoopi Goldberg has said some cringe statements on The View, and even before she was on The View. So she strikes me as, you ever met someone that has no filter? That's how she kind of presents herself sometimes. Like, it's like she has no filter. So she just says whatever comes out. But what I wish would have happened, and when Jackson Hinkle was on here, we had this discussion because that was right after she was suspended. What I wish would have happened, instead of them suspending her, I wish they would have had a discussion about that, like on The View, like a group discussion about what it means to be Jewish, what it means to be Jewish in the United States. Like, I felt like that would have been more beneficial than just suspending someone. I don't know. I mean, I understand what Whoopi was trying to say, but you know how it is, you guys. You know how it is in this country. I wish they would have just had a discussion about it. I told you, I don't like the whole like cancel people, fire people, suspend people. Like, that doesn't get anything resolved. The best thing to do is to educate people. Seems like we don't want to do that sometimes in this country. It's just easier just to write people off. Sadness. Mr. X says, Mitch McConnell said Black people got reparations. They got a Black president. Yes, he did say that. He so did. Oh my God, cringe. DJ D14D says, I defined white not as a skin color, but a collection of behaviors and ideas. That is interesting. You'll have to tell me about that sometime. Saul said whiteness is inclusive when it needed to oppress Black Americans. Woof. The fire is coming out tonight. Oh man, ladies and gentlemen. Astral Gypsy, what's up? Says it may be shitty, but I just think Whoopi is all that sharp. I don't think Whoopi is all that sharp. I think it was simple lack of understanding. The View isn't exactly the gold standard for intellectual achievement. There you go. There you go. Oh, Mark said Whoopi is Black, Jewish, convert, racist, and very rich. How much does she send to poor Blacks? Oh, Mark, you can't bring up the class issue. You can't bring up the class issue, Mark. Don't you know people get mad at you for doing that? Just kidding. Just kidding. Definitely bringing that up on this show. I talk about it a lot. All right. So I think that is all I'm going to show from that video. That conversation does go on, but if you want to see the rest of it, I mean, it is on Bad Faith podcast. And I think there's 30 minutes of this episode, and the full episode is probably on Patreon. But I'm looking at the time and I do have to speed things up. Okay, Eric, let's go ahead and do those Rockfin comments. Wee! Thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin. Roger Meadows, Sabs saw yesterday's show on the Rewind, and it's funny how you were talking about how unions become corrupt, and Professor Wolf saying that leadership has declined. And we were just talking about that on a Zoom call yesterday for the New York Health Act that I had to jump off from your show for but they're the biggest impediment, not insurance, but the unions. Union leadership secures their position to keep members voting for them by securing the health care. They lose their bargaining chip. When we passed the New York Health Act, they convinced members to be against it as well. If we're from the cooperative world can build up enough capital and lobbying, might we can be a counterbalance to the unions when they work against the public interest, especially being number 2 as states most friendly to unions. Also, remember SCOTUS decision of Janus versus AFSCME a couple of years ago for the weekend unions, where they ruled unions can't force members to pay dues, but they must provide them with the same protections as due paying members. SCOTUS always working for the corporate. Let's end this back and forth and trade unions in for worker cooperatives and be done with it already. Regarding truckers convoy, we need a constitutional amendment to make access to banking services and transactions a right, and government must get court order to freeze and seize assets. Also throw in economic sanctions against other countries as unconstitutional. Hope you told Rome to watch Hardlin's media. And that is why I think the most effective way, Rome is doing a tour for the poor right now. Roger, he's out and about. And that is why I think the most effective way to change this from the ground up, starting in those 24 states that allow for ballot initiatives. Do you know that although the Dems couldn't pass the freedom to vote to stop gerrymandering, what most don't know is that all 50 state constitutions have as an amendment making partisan gerrymandering unconstitutional, but Dems and media won't tell us that. Get it done in the states. AOC doesn't take corporate PAC money, but she gives our money to Dems that do. That is true. Thank you so much for that tip on Rockfin, Nicole Faith. Thank you all so much. One thing that I've been doing this month, because it is Black History Month, I've been introducing people to an African American from Black history. And I've been trying to introduce people that a lot of people are probably not familiar with because they're not as popular. I'm just going to keep it real. So tonight's Black History Spotlight is doobie-doobie-doo. James McCune Smith. Now, this is another one that was sent to me by a subscriber. Let me go ahead and put the banner up here. I like to put their names underneath of it just in case someone comes in late and they're like, what is happening and who's this guy on the screen? James McCune Smith. So who was he? James McCune Smith was an American physician, abolitionist, and author who was born in Manhattan. He was the first African American to hold a medical degree, and he was graduated at the top of his class at the University of Glasgow in Scotland. After his return to the United States, he became the first African American to run a pharmacy in the nation. Now, before tonight, how many of you heard of James McCune Smith? Let me see if there's any hands. Any hands? Yep. Oh yeah, guys, for those of you who came in late, I had to go live earlier tonight because there's like I don't know how many streams starting at 7 tonight, and then there's that big candidate stream that starts at 7, and then I know some people wanted to watch that. CJ's also about to go live in a couple of minutes about the candidate situation, so that's why I went early at 5:30. It's throwing me off too. It makes me feel a little weird. I'm not used to going live at this time. But yeah. So yeah. James McCune Smith. First pharmacy, the first African American to run a pharmacy in the United States. So that's someone who is good to know. By the way, that would be a really good trivia question. Now you know. Now you know. All right. It is about time for me to head out. LPA Film said, when are we calling into the show? I want to co-host with Sabby. I've got too much to say. Hope you're ready, Sabby. So that's actually a benefit that patrons get. The ones that sign up for the Sabbies category, the Sabsters and the Ultimate, they get to come onto the show. So I started that. Was that last Friday? I think I started that last Friday, where patrons can come on and do like a Q&A. So yeah, that is a patron benefit. I'm still kind of hesitant about the app call-in, you guys. I have to like look up some things. I've heard some concerns about the ownership, like who owns it. And that's what's kind of concerning to me. So I have to do more research. That's why I haven't joined like call-in. But I'm also on Rockfin. You guys, if you following me in here, also follow me on Rockfin and Odyssey. Like I said, anytime YouTube can just come and just shut us all down. And at that point, there will be, you wouldn't be able to see me anywhere. So follow me there as well. And also subscribe to my Substack. So this way you can sign up and be on my email list. And this is important because if you get on my email list, you will receive alerts every time I go live. So sometimes YouTube doesn't send the notification, right? It just happens. Let me go ahead and pull that up for you. I'll give you that link. Balls. Oh, there it is. I just had it. Okay. Sabby Sabs live stream alerts. Let me share the link. Doobie doobie doo. I hope this is the right one. Yeah, this is the right one. So here's the link. I'm going to put it in the chat. And what happens is if you click on this link, it's going to ask you for your email address. You enter your email address and that's it. You're signed up. That simple, that easy. So Jimmy Dore also does that. He does it where like if you're a member, you sign up and you get those alerts. Yeah, there it is. All right. It's in the chat too. All right. All right. Okay, guys, I am going to head out because I need to eat dinner. I need to eat a little something. But thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight, guys. I had an awesome time. I hope you learned something new. And again, you know what I always say. Have a good night. Keep up the fight. Whoops. I forgot to hit the end live stream.